those in the live streaming world, I apologize. Over here at the MCU'S Bleeding Edge YouTube channel and podcast. Of course, the responsibility for the lateness of the stream is my fault. I'm Jeff S, aka TrueKnowledge, and I apologize for the late start. Cyberneticshark, my co-host, of course, was ready to rock and roll. It's my late ass that caused it. So, as usual, he is the more professional and punctual of the two. But either way, we're going to do episode 3 here in the MCU'S Bleeding Edge of the Rings of the Power series. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. I don't know if you say it's. I'm still not quite sure if you're supposed to call it the Amazon series or the Prime Video series. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I believe it's Amazon.
It's Amazon, an Amazon original.
There you go. All right, there you go. Cyberneticshark, how is your voting going, sir? On the what I forgot how to explain it exactly. What what is the contest thing that you're in there?
What, the Face of Horror?
Oh yeah, Face of Horror. That's what it is. That's right.
It's going smashing. I'm still in third. The end of this round is tomorrow at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. And today only, for anybody that pays for votes, gets 2 for 1. So if you buy, say you spend $5, that's worth $10 today only. But tomorrow is the end, like I said, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time for this round. It gets cut to the top 15. So any votes is helpful to keep me in that third spot at this moment. As time goes on, of course, we'll get closer to having to get up there to the number 1 spot to be able to stay, or the number 2 spot. There is a redemption round, which they are calling the Reanimator round, that will take place prior to the final round to win the ultimate prize. For anybody that places second place in their respective groups. So I have ample chances if I get into second or first. So every vote counts.
There you go. And there it is right there. And I'll make sure that I vote tonight before I go to bed. That's the last that.
Yes.
Sure, but
so just to let people in. So the free daily vote under there, that's every 24 hours you get a free vote. If you put in a debit or credit card, or if you put in your Facebook stuff, you get 2 free votes a day. Otherwise, the red button that says scare vote, that's the one for people that are interested in giving to charity for research for cancer for children. That's where that special deal I just talked about takes place.
There you go. Most definitely. Let's try to get Cyber pushed up to first place, man. I'm doing my part. You better believe it. Shit. I might figure out how to see if I can vote 17 times tonight before the end of the night. So I can get him. I might fix this bitch just to get Cyber up to first place. And I've got to make it happen. We'll have to see what happens.
Fix it.
There you go. Either way. Oh my God, Cyber's real name. Jesus. I just call him Cyber. So I'm always, shocked when I see his real identity. But either way, folks, I actually, to be honest with you, I thought it'd be interesting if me and Cyber just jammed the show, tonight and whatnot and everything. I didn't work that hard really to try to find another guest for the show. Cyber and I haven't done a show together in a long time, and to be honest with you, I thought maybe we'd do a little more of an intimate, kind of back and forth, kind of deal, change things up a little bit. And honestly, to tell you the truth, now Cyber and I already are in disagreement. Well, not complete disagreement, but just I want to put it out there right now that I thought the episode was good, but Cyber thinks it was better than episode 2. I'd say there was, if I had to say now, I felt about the same way at the end of both episodes. About the same thing. But essentially, episode, I believe at the end of episode 2, we ended up with essentially Galadriel and what is it? Hardale? No, Halbrand. I apologize. they were stranded on a raft or whatnot, and everything in the ocean and whatnot. We got a ship pull up and whatnot and everything. There was a character with like a almost and I don't know, angelic. He had like a glow to him and whatnot and everything. I didn't know who he was, to be honest with you, at first. I don't now. But of course, he was Elrond. Now I'm not gonna lie here, folks. I'm not a complete, Lord of the Rings, lore person all the way. I do know who he is. But at the same time, I just want to put it out there. I'm not. There's some of you in the comment section and whatnot and everything have been very helpful in terms of pointing out some of the things. But either way, so essentially, as the third episode starts, the ship ends up basically picking them up. They pick up, Galadriel. They pick up, I apologize, Halbrand and whatnot and everything. They're still together. They're a pair, and they end up on the ship, and essentially, at that point, there's a crew and everything and whatnot and all that, and there's a mention of going home, and essentially right after that, we end up going to, I believe, right from there, the harbor of Pronto. The tall statue built to the cliffs, yes. And essentially from there, they got the boat, and essentially Galadriel and Hardale or Halbrand and whatnot and everything. Halbrand says, since when do men build things like this or whatever? It was the elves that did, of course. And essentially, basically, really, so we got a lot of like geographic movement. We saw a lot of different places and whatnot and everything. I thought that was interesting. We end up in going from there, basically over to at that point, Numenor. And from what I understand, Numenor essentially is Tolkien's version almost of Atlantis to some extent. They're very similar. At that point, from there is power, essentially. And also, I want to point out, Cyber, I'm sure you noticed too, that I will say the visuals were beautiful, all throughout the episode. I think that's been solid all throughout the series, personally. I think they've done a great job with them. And at that point, I don't want to say it was epic, but it looked really good. The buildings were really good. At that point, from there, again, we end up essentially, going into, I apologize, Numenor, and, essentially, if I understand correctly, we end up, being introduced to the Valar, or from Valnar. They're men, and basically, essentially, there's some drama, and essentially, if I understand correctly, they're banned men from Valinor, and they're essentially, men had to stay mortal. Okay, all right. So essentially, overall, from there, Isidore, of course, is the captain of the ship, that ended up, picking up, Galadriel and, why have such a hard time name with this episode? I don't know. Harbrand. And from there, Isidore, from what I understand, essentially, and Cyber, if you know more about him, feel free to jump in. But essentially, if I understand correctly from the the lore, he does actually come from the original Tolkien books. And he's familiar, he's familiar from that time period. I forget the name of the actor that actually plays him. I will look in a minute and find him. But basically, so he essentially is actually from the original books. And he's an influential character. And although story to some extent, give I guess a recap almost, is somewhat attached to almost the story of Numenor, I guess. the Great Kingdom. And essentially, basically, Numenor was an island that was brought up from the sea by the Belair, as we just mentioned. It was a gift to men after the war against the Dark Lord Bargath. The Valar banned the Numerians from sailing far to the west because they did not want them to come across the Undying Lands. The Numerians began to resent this because they felt that their chance of everlasting life was being denied. So in an effort to take their power back, they began to sail the east and colonize parts of the Middle Earth. And of course, this is going way back in time here. In the year 3255, the Second Age, at that point, essentially, let's see. Basically, let's see. Elendil, son of all right, guys, here we go. Amandil, a lord, so of the faithful, the Numerians, who were still loyal to the Valar. Their friend the elves were against the practices of Farazan and Sauron, I apologize. Eldel, 2 sons, Isildur, who, I do know who that is, and Elrond. His daughters, Irian, who appears in the Rings of Power, vengeance by the show. Of course, Isildur will definitely be familiar with Lord of the Rings, as he is the ancestor of Aragorn. And you see him. I believe in the first film? Isn't he the one that essentially, when Elrond tells him, to cast the ring into the fire and whatnot, and everything and all that? Isn't that Isildur?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, he is. That's who he was. Yeah, that's exactly who he is. Yep. Yeah, he is. He was the one who defeated Sauron and essentially, took the one ring to himself, and it was corrupted by it, essentially. So back, essentially back to, to Elendil. Elendil also is one of Aragorn's ancestors. Another tie-in, to Lord of the Rings, which is obviously a positive thing. And basically, Elendil's bloodline became the long-lived Dunedain, of which Aragorn was a part. So basically, the downfall of the Normir and the faithful ended up, happening or whatnot in Middle Earth. And from there, there's a sinking of Numenor. And that's when basically, I guess, essentially a part of the population went to Middle Earth. Elendil was welcomed by the Elven king Gil-galad and founded the kingdom of Arnor in SA 3320. So essentially, Elendil's sons went farther south, founded their own kingdoms. There was Elrond establishing the city of Minas, Numenor, which I know that one too. I think that one's even Lord of the Rings. Isildur founding Minas Ithil and Ithilien. And from there, the 2 sons ruled this new kingdom that they called Gondor. So they created Gondor, which we do know from the movies themselves at that point. Now, this part here, as far as the battles that were going on and whatnot, there was a conflict at the point with Sauron and whatnot and everything, and I'm not that well versed with it and whatnot. I'm really not, unfortunately. But essentially, as far as he goes, overall, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I think that basically kind of explains who he is. At that point, he's tied into Numenor, and I believe he'll end up playing an important part in the story overall. We'll end up seeing. But overall, let's see. Now, let me just check and make sure I actually know what name of this actor is that plays him really quick. It's bothering me. Oh, there we go. All right. Come on now. Oh, I can't find this son of a bitch. I apologize. I'm telling you, this is driving me crazy. Either way, bottom line. So anyways, I apologize. Back to episode 3, and I'll stop right there. Actually, I really don't want to go any farther than that. we get essentially, to Numenor, and at that point, here, let's see. Blah blah. We end up basically at that point. It's a little bit complicated for me when I'm trying to dictate it. Oh, so essentially, when they go to when they go to Numenor, essentially, Galadriel kind of tells Halbrand, not to antagonize anyone, and they end up in front of Queen Regent Muriel and Farazan. Galadriel is proud and spunky and asks for passage by Middle Earth. And Halbrand does some fancy footwork, trying to be nice. They're in 3 days with some light surveillance. And back to Isildur. At that point, Isildur is on the ship training with the Lower Cross team or whatever, and one of them almost gets on reward. And essentially, from there, we end up with the sea trial. And from there, back in the palace, and I'll stop there, but I'll let me stop right there. Now, Cyber, I guess first off, what was your take on the introduction, I guess, of Elrond into the show? What was your take of the starting off, and what do you get? What was your first impression of him as a character? I guess.
Let's see. So, I'm not too familiar with the character, so I wasn't like 100% sure like who the character was or anything like that. But what I feel the actor brought to it, I thought he did a good job. I thought it was a decent introduction. I thought he was an interesting character. I liked how he delivered his lines and how he presented himself in this portion of the episode. And I thought that was an interesting, first kind of look and take on the character as well. Like I said, because I don't know much about him, I can have nothing to go by, so I can't say like I knew anything about the character before. So for my viewing experience, this is my first time seeing this character. So what I've seen so far, I have enjoyed, and I thought that he did a good job. And also to wondering who played Isildur is Maxim Baldry.
Okay. Okay, excellent. Now, let's see here. Now we can finally find out what the name of the actor is that's playing Elrond here. It's driving me crazy. All right, fabulous. Here we go.
Lloyd Owen.
Ah, there we go. And I should know it. I've heard of it before, actually, to tell you the truth. I have. I can't remember what I've seen him in, but there we go. All right. So Lloyd Owen. Oh, so anyways, from there, Cyber, let me ask you a question. What do you think, as we start the episode, obviously, I don't want to, try to theorize too far ahead, but they seem pretty intent in pairing Galadriel with Halbrand. And, I almost felt, I don't want to get too far in the episode, but I felt like there was almost like a romantic vibe to some extent, maybe. Some connection there. But again, now, there is that whole, deal at this point where there is almost like a, it's not favored, to like interbreed or, to go to marry, between races or have romance between races or whatnot. It's almost like a taboo, to some extent. At that point, what did you think? Going to off the end of episode 2 and then going to the opening of episode 3. What are you thinking of the pairing?
The pairing of Halbrand and Galadriel.
Oh no, Halbrand and Galadriel.
Oh, okay, Halbrand. Sorry. So I think that most definitely I see them trying to create a love triangle there. I definitely see them trying to have kind of like a secret love relationship with themselves, like they're trying to make them like that, most definitely. And I think that so far the two have been interesting together, and that they have created a very cohesive battle relationship, I feel, with what they've been dealing with in the last 2 episodes. And I think that there's a lot more potential to those 2 characters further down in the season, where they might end up together. Who knows? Even though there's that taboo of, interspecies, dating each other and so forth. I definitely feel that that's where they're pointing to have them have like this supposed relationship. And maybe, who knows, I'm not too familiar with Galadriel's lore either, but maybe that's one of the reasons why she ends up being the Galadriel we end up knowing in the Lord of the Rings films. Maybe there's something in her past that we haven't seen, that maybe this has to do with that, maybe, of why she ends up becoming that, fairy witch that she is in the movies,
Yeah.
To this point.
Yes, most definitely. And, and of course, one of the big differences between the 2 races is that, of course, that men are mortal, of course, and the elves live forever, essentially, So, I mean, that played out in the first film when, you had Liv Tyler's character decide to essentially choose to live a more life at the end of, there towards the end of, I believe, the 3rd film. And basically, for me, I guess I would just say, as far as like the Halbrand Galadriel connection, I don't know that. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to get too be negative about it. I don't want to be too positive. I'm not. At that point, I guess all I would say is, I mean, obviously they're going to the place with it. I didn't expect it. I really thought that Galadriel was going to be more of a solo character. I didn't expect them pairing. I really didn't expect to see her pair with anybody or team up or my just we watched the initial episode and whatnot and everything was she was sort of going to be the focus. No, it is an interesting dynamic, and as far as Halbrand goes, he's pretty mysterious. Southlands, which essentially becomes Mordor. And at that point, Halbrand is a king in exile. They say, okay. So, anyways, basically, Cyber. I guess my other question would be, what was your take as far as, again, the visuals in terms of Numenor and whatnot and everything?
My thoughts on like the city itself.
Yeah, how they shot it, how it looked and everything.
Okay, so the opening sequence where it shows it like kind of panning over it was fantastically done. It was so gorgeous and so amazing, and just the CGI work they did was fantastic. And I totally felt that whole real world was real. Like, that's how good they did of a job, and it just was so like awe-inspiring. As it's panning over it and I'm watching, I'm just kind of like in awe, like going, oh my gosh, I wish this was a real place. I mean, yeah, they definitely take it, like J.R.R. Tolkien probably definitely took like ideas from different landscapes of different countries and stuff like that, probably that he read about or saw pictures of and so forth, like that, like Ireland, Scotland, and stuff like that. That Scandinavian countries, most definitely that's what this gives me the feel of, and that's it. Just that it looks so like close to that it's so amazing and just awesome. So I think that was a really great beginning shot to Numenor, and then just the city itself, what they showed of it, it was really fantastically done. It looked really good. I thought that it was very very Lord of the Ring-ish, very, Viking, early century English look and stuff like that. It just looked really superb. And I thought it was amazing. I thought that whole town was really cool. And I really liked that whole sequence.
Yeah, I did too. I like the fact that they're moving around. That there's, they're changing locations, we're getting to explore sort of like, more of, I guess that, this world almost, I think that I think that's a good thing. I think it adds something to the show. to not have everything right in the Middle Earth to some extent. You know, I like the fact that we're getting, you know, I like the scenes in the Thundering Sea are very I don't want to say bland, but they're very I don't want to say flat. I like the addition of it. I like the fact that, you know, I like the fact that they involved the Thundering Sea. I like the fact that we're seeing seafaring and whatnot and all that. I like that part. I do. Overall, you know, I feel like essentially, you know, the addition of Numenor to the show is definitely an interesting thing. It really is. And I must agree with Cyber 100% that they did a wonderful job with CGI and whatnot. I mean, I can't even imagine how long it took to actually put that together. Either way, now, essentially, you know, besides, you know, basically, you know, as far as Numenor goes, you know, again, like I was saying before, they're given 3 days, you know, essentially, by the queen, I believe she is. Yeah, the queen regent, Muriel, and then of course Farazan. And basically from there, you know, going forward, we move forward, and we end up with we end up seeing Isildur and Irion, who Isildur being, you know, of course, Alandel's son. And beyond that, essentially, God bless you. From there, well, excuse me, actually, before that, actually, there was sort of like almost like a, I guess, something like a tavern scene or whatever and whatnot. We see some of the Numerian locals, and basically from there, you know, we end up, you know, essentially, and you know, having Halbrand, getting drunk, with you know, some of the Numerians or whatever, whatnot. And from there, steals the one guy's crest. They weren't drunk enough, and there ended up being like a bit of a spat. Elrond kicks some ass. You know, there's a little, I guess, light action. The guards of the Numeria, I'm assuming, end up grabbing them, and from there, essentially, we end up with, you know, a message from Irion, of course, who is Eldel's daughter, and from there, basically, we end up with this again, the sea trials I was talking about before. Irion is now she's been accepted to the Builders Guild, which I guess she'd been rejected previously. Isildur had given her a reply, and from there, essentially, there's, you know, we get some dynamic, some back and forth, you know, between these characters. You know, I guess essentially almost, you know, to some extent, Elendil's kids or family. And from there, of course, Galadriel ends up visiting Halbrand in the jail, Numerian. And from there, you know, essentially, she's kind of gives off that, you know, she's somewhat aware that there's more going on with him than he really, you know, is giving off. It's, you know, it's becoming more apparent that he's not just some, like, you know, I guess, seafarer or whatever, you know, or merchant or whatever he used to be, you know, originally or whatever, you know, in the beginning. He actually is somebody of stature. And at that point, you know, like I said, Yaldil, you know, he's in jail. And from there, you know, basically, you know, again, Gal wants to know, you know, I know something's going on here. She has a scroll, and the symbol on it matches the one wearing around his neck. Now, from there, to explain the whole situation, basically, the scroll itself, like I said, it essentially proves a symbol around the one that matches the one on his neck. And from there, your people have no king, she ended up saying, because you are him. So he is the king, I guess, basically, of the Southlands, which become Mordor. And from there, he drops the charade and announces, that he is of nobility and that his ancestor swore a blood oath to Morgoth. So there's a connection right there. We talked about that earlier in the series, that we're sort of fleshing out, what the dynamics were as far as the fact they made it evident that, at the bat, that there were parts of races in Middle Earth that actually were sided with the Dark Lord, which is a little different. The Lord of the Rings films a little bit. We didn't have that dynamic that I can remember. Everything, all the races were pretty much unified against the Dark, against Sauron at that point, which I think is interesting. I think it's interesting to see how that plays out across the entire span of the series. Just in terms of the dynamic of them actually introducing more and explaining more, of kind of, I guess, the side of the of Sauron, what that presence is all about throughout the series. We haven't gotten a lot of that at this point. We've pretty much just been experiencing people from the Middle Earth and whatnot. From there, basically, after dropping the charade, essentially, we end up going from there to the Harfoots. We got Harfoots again in this episode. Got love some Harfoots, which of course are hobbits. We got Nori. I like Nori. And the brandy boots. Oh no, I was gonna say the brandy boots are in the Lord. No, they're not. The brandy boots are not. So anyways, basically, we go. We end up going to. We're doing the Harfoots. And basically, essentially, we end up experiencing Nori's family, her parents. They're the Brandyfoot, and basically Nori's ankle's busted. He's there's a cart essentially to bring him around, and essentially from there, we end up with the stranger. I guess that's essentially the title that we know of him as. Who in episode 2, they actually almost rescued. Essentially from the embers of the burning city. Essentially, from there, we end up getting into the stranger and getting into Sarak's book. Poppy's in there, and from there, essentially, we end up with Poppy stealing the book. Now, essentially, there's a celebration. Sarak gives a speech, talks about the migrations, how some of the Harfoots have fallen behind. If anyone falls behind now, they'll be carried with them. From there, essentially, we end up with the Harfoots have a dark side, essentially, to some extent, which you already kind of realized. And from there, we end up essentially, I'll stop there. What Cyber, before I get into the Harfoots, what are your thoughts on the fact that we end up finding out that, that Halbrand actually has this connection where, he's actually royalty. We knew he was sort of escaping, from where he'd been, as he said that in episode 2. But what do you think in terms of the fact that, essentially, what do you think of this twist, essentially? And then what do you think of the fact that we actually end up finding out that, there is this bond where, the ancestors of Harbrand had actually been aligned to Morgoth? basically. So there was an actual, a clear dynamic where men were intertwined, with the Dark Lord. Now, what do you think that? Were you surprised? I mean, obviously we must have. We all knew he had to be somebody, but I mean, in terms of him turning out to be royalty and whatnot and everything, he's actually a king. What do you think of that spin? What do you think of that dynamic? And what do you think, overall of this angle that I was talking about just before? How we have this difference in this series where we actually have people in different races that actually are connected and actually serve, or are of the faithful of the dark side, of the Dark Lord. Do you like that dynamic that they have that different spin going on compared to the three films?
So I was not shocked by what's his name being of royalty. I had a feeling that he was already a part of that. Like, I had that feeling just because why is he out here like this? Why is he here? How does his presence, in the scenes and everything, how they play out and how his presence is when he's talking, when he's presenting himself, it seemed like he was of royal birth, or he was of a, proper type of people. So that really didn't shock me. I thought that was, fun how they kind of pulled it in and added it in, and it was like, okay, so yes, this is actually really who he is, and so that was really cool. Now, the whole concept of there being the mixture of people that are faithful to being good, and then those to Sauron, that was a really cool twist, I thought. I think that is an interesting way to diverge themselves from the original films and from the Hobbit films, to give you kind of a new light and look at, are all these things that we saw in the previous films, how accurate is that? And how much do we actually really know? And so I think that was clever in the writing, that they give us kind of this little twist that allows it to kind of intrigue you to want to learn more. And I think that's what's going to keep people coming back, is they're going to want to know more about that. And I think that was really clever writing.
I agree. I really do. I think that it's a good change. It really is. I think that it's good to see the connections, that they've been able to put together. We're aware to some extent that that Amazon Studios or whatever did not have access to some of the Tolkien stuff and whatnot and everything, that it was sort of off limits at that point. I like the way they flushed that out. I think it's a great change. I really do. I think that it's something that really, for me, I'm looking forward to seeing that play out across the span of this first season. Because essentially, what I want to understand, what I want to break down and understand for myself, is essentially the mindsets, or the psychologies, of these different members of these races, that actually support the Dark Lord, that dichotomy and whatnot and everything. Because I think it's interesting, to have that fragmentation where there's not this full unison, against the dark power and whatnot and everything. You've actually got people now, actually, the races that are supporting it. So it is a different angle. It really is. It adds something different. It adds some intrigue. I think it's going to definitely be a good vehicle, for maybe some sabotage, maybe some shady kind of characters that later on in the series, whatnot, that maybe could play both sides, or you could have double agents, secret agents, all that kind of stuff. So basically, essentially, from as far, I wanted to just go ahead and mention really quick that I didn't really explain fully in terms of the scroll with Galadriel, that they did basically go into I believe it's called, let's see, what is it called? The House of I can't remember. I can't remember from memory. They basically just wanted to point out essentially that the scroll itself ends up being along the lines of, you know, I believe it ends up being like a map of the Southlands, essentially, if I remember correctly. And from there, oh, here we go. The Hall of Law is what it was called. There we go. That's you got the scroll. From there, you know, we realize that the sigil is a map of the Southlands, and we figure out at that point that there's this plan to turn the area into a realm where evil can essentially live. Now, of course, this is going to turn into, you know, the Mordor. At that point, you know, we find out that, you know, there's this plan where evil can essentially live, you know, under Sauron, who of course was Morgoth's successor. At that point, you know, I just want to kind of just, you know, fill in some gaps there. At that point, basically, you know, we were kind of in a place where essentially we were talking about, you know, Galadriel visiting Halbrand in jail, with the Harfoots, with the celebration, and essentially, you know, it started giving the speech, and from there, essentially, we end up with the stranger, essentially, I guess, swiping the pages from the book, the Stars book, and setting the page on fire while trying to read it. You know, and he does some of his more magic or, you know, powers, whatever he's got going on. He speaks. Oh, well, no, he doesn't speak, but Stardock essentially, you know, is not happy with the situation, and that, you know, essentially we end up, you know, getting into the Harfoot law, having to do with, you know, de-caravanning, you know, as a punishment, you know, for anybody that essentially breaks those Harfoot rules. And, you know, obviously, you know, they're not too happy about the stranger, you know, and from there, you know, we end up getting basically, you know, I apologize, Stardock, essentially, you know, saying that you know, they can stay, Nori, the family, whatnot, and everything. They don't have to be shipped off. They don't have to be, you know, decaravanned or whatever. And from there, we end up with the migration. So from there, the stranger, of course, is still with Nori and the family, whatnot, and everything. The migration is occurring, and from there, friend. Oh yeah, that's right. You know, we actually do get speaking from the stranger. He calls Nori friend. The stranger picks up the cart, pushes, you know, the Harfoots away. We go to the Southlands with Erendor, and basically he had been, you know, dragged off in the underground tunnels in the Southlands. From there, we end up with essentially Orcs, you know, popping up in the series, in the show. We've always seen it before. We get Orcs, and at that point, you know, we get an Orc saying Ador, I believe you pronounce it. And basically from there, we end up getting up some elves. The Watchwarden Revion, another name Medor. There's an expedition, and we find out the Orcs don't like the sun. We already knew that. These Orcs, of course, are almost like albino, so they have no problem with it. there's apparently there's kind of like searching for something, and Revian tells Medor and Erdor they can get out of the trench, to escape, get the hell out of there. And from there, essentially, we end up with, an actual sort of like, skirmish between the Orcs and the Elves. And from there, we end up with I guess our first experience with this large old tree, and we end up, having Medor dead in the whole tree drama with the tree, and from there, basically, we end up with, the captives, mounting rebellion. There's a release of a warg, which I thought was pretty cool. I like seeing the different creatures and that which I think we're going to get more of in the series too. And essentially, upon Revian comes out of the trench, and essentially gets arrowed to death. Which was pretty intense. And the Orcs are about to slice Ordo's throat. And they say, well, we're going to bring him to Adar. Now, we don't know who Adar is, of course. I don't, anyway. But, Cyber, what were your thoughts, essentially, basically? What do you think of the difference between the Orcs and there's another stark difference. The Orcs do look different so far, the ones we've seen. They're not like the ones we saw in the other Lord of the Rings films. What did you think, basically, I would say, of the Harfoots aspect of the episode? What did you take out of all that? I mean, did you I'll tell you, as far as the stranger goes, I'm a little flummoxed. I'm still not, completely understanding who the hell he is to some extent, whatnot. But as far as Harfoots go, what is your take on the Harfoots at this point and everything? What do you think of the celebration essentially, and the migration, and Nori and the family and whatnot and everything? What did you get? What did you get out of the Harfoot part of the episode, I guess?
Well, it was fun. It was kind of like, I feel, the comedic section of the episode. Yes. Whenever these hobbit-like creatures are, we do realize and know that these are actual not hobbits yet, but the Leftwoods are what basically ends up becoming what the Shire people are in yes. the Lord of the Rings films. But I definitely think that it's nice to go from Galadriel and Halbrand and those other characters, Elrond and stuff like that, to the Lightfoots, to kind of give another perspective of the world of the Lord of the Rings. And I think it's nice to see something that's similar to the Hobbits, kind of getting an idea of where the Hobbits came from and who they, their ancestors were. So I think that aspect was really good in this episode. I thought it gave a little more light on that. And the stranger, aspect of it, seeing kind of his, what he's all about and stuff like that. There's a lot of rumors going around about who he is. In the comments, somebody was saying they thought it was Gandalf and stuff like that. But I was talking to today a little bit about this series. They mentioned they thought possibly this could be from the original series, the witch or the warlock or wizard that I'm drawing a blank at his name right now. Starts with an R. Something the Brown. I know what character you're talking. Yeah. We think that that's who this is, because out of all the things that this guy has done in the series so far, he has a lot of the earth elements that are present around him. And so that is what this character in the original series, that's pretty much what his powers were. As we saw in the films, he was riding rabbits, he's part of the earth,
Yes.
he uses the nature and stuff like that to fix things. So that's who we're thinking this, because it is very possible that he could have been alive around this time, up to the point of when we got to Lord of the Rings, because he was kind of like one of a few wizards that are around. He's a little bit of a mortal type of character. So this would be more logical than it being Gandalf, when Gandalf wasn't as old as everyone thought he was. So we're thinking it's him, but I think that his whole aspect so far, him not really talking, but doing all these kind of weird like pantomime expressions like that, has been kind of an interesting aspect of, you know, these episodes so far too. And especially in this one, there were quite a few, you know, clues and stuff like that pertaining to maybe we'll find out more about him in the future. And I think that's kind of, you know, something to look forward to.
Me too. I think that. Oh, pardon me. Oh, I apologize, folks. No, so, and I, you know, and I think that I like. I mean, I like the wizard angle. You know, I do. You know, I don't think that I don't think we need Gandalf in this. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it had to happen or anything like that. Whatnot. I don't think we're gonna get him, obviously. Of course, you never know. It's possible, but you know, at that point, you know, we really kind of, to some extent, and we end up, you know, getting some actual deaths and whatnot and everything and all that. You know, it was in the episode and whatnot and everything. With the Orcs, with the elves fighting. You know, at that point, you know, basically, I'm assuming we're probably gonna end up seeing Sauron, episode 4, is what my thinking. And we're gonna finally. I don't. You know, I feel we're actually gonna be, you know, visiting wherever he's at, or not. I mean, and I'm looking forward to that. I am. But so I really ask you, now, in terms of you know, there wasn't a lot of action. There really, you know, there's been a ton of it in the series anyway. There really hasn't been. But and I'm sure you would agree with me that there's gonna be, we're gonna see. I don't know if we're gonna get battles, but we're gonna get more action as we go across the different series. Now, what I want to ask you essentially was, we haven't got many creatures yet. We haven't seen a lot. You know, we know they exist. You know, we saw the eagles at one point and everything. You know, we saw the warg. Well, I thought the warg looked great. You know, oh, I apologize. So, Sauron, what I basically asked you is just that, did you feel like, you know, basically, you know, we know that, that the Queen, you know, Regent Miri denied Galadriel's request for ship back to Middle Earth. At that point, do you think that? Now, I haven't any information on this, but do you think that Numenor is going to play a large role, at least in the season?
I think so. Eventually, I think that will become a center point, I want to say, at some point throughout the series, because I feel that character has a lot of meaning to the previous installments. So I feel like at some point we're going to get bombarded with a whole bunch of that story, and that is going to, you know, basically help to tie this series to those Lord of the Rings films. So just like there's several characters I feel that are going to connect that, you know, that are mentioned or talked about, such as like already Galadriel, you know, what's his name? Wow.
Harfoots?
No,
Elrond?
No. Elrond, sorry. Elrond.
Oh,
Elrond, and so like both of them, those two characters are very much big characters in the other Lord of the Rings films, and so those two characters are kind of a tie to those. So I feel like this character and there's going to be other characters I feel down the line that are going to have that connective tissue. So I think that is something that they're probably waiting on to adding, so to connect that to those other films and give us more of something fun and something to tie and connect to that previous films we've seen.
Oh yeah, I mean they definitely. I mean, it only makes common sense for them to try to make as many of those times as they could possibly do. I mean, the films were epic. There's still tons of fans of them. At that point, basically what I'd say would be that essentially for me, I felt like, overall, I like the Academy episode. I like the fact that they did switch over. I like the fact that they actually we saw the men. I like the fact that we were introduced to more, to Numenor. At that point though, I'd like to ask you, what did you basically think of the fact that, I guess if anything, to some extent, we saw Galadriel sort of, kind of like her role, at least the character not, participating in a ton of the episode. There was more of a shift. At that point, which I think is logical, right? It's probably a good way to go. You don't want to overdo it with her. But basically, apologies, folks. I did not sleep well last night. Oh, so basically, at that point, what I asked you was, in terms of, I guess, if some theorizing, what would be your opinion? Do you believe, as terms of, the Halbrand Galadriel relationship and whatnot, and everything, right? And the fact that we know that Halbrand's ancestors were actually teamed up with Morgoth. What do you think of the fact that we end up with with Harvard in prison, essentially, and everything and whatnot. Well, I guess what I want to say basically is, what do you think that? I guess if you could, I guess what would you see? How would you see that him playing out in the series? I mean, he's a big character. They're gonna, he's gonna be in there. Um, you know, I would assume at some point they're gonna break him and Galdell up to some degree. We're gonna see the Southlands, and whatnot. I mean, they're probably gonna shift again. We're gonna see more geographical shifts. We're gonna see what ends up becoming, essentially Mordor. Could be episode 4. We'll possibly get that. At that point, we heard, of course, the name of, I believe it was Ador, who I guess is the leader of the Orcs. Yeah, Ador. And I guess what do you think of the fact that so far they pretty much, we don't have a big conflict yet. We don't want to get one, but at that point, do you think we're going to get sort of almost like, I guess, like a la WandaVision kind of deal, what they did with Sword, where they're going to get almost more of a focus on the actual dark side, like, Sauron, you know what I mean? Their goals, you know what I mean? We know about the plan, essentially, to create essentially Morgoth, or, Mordor. But, well, for one thing, would you agree with me that we're probably going to end up at least seeing Sauron? We're going to get Sauron episode 4 full blown, I would think. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, they're definitely going to have Sauron in this because he is kind of the main antagonist of the series. So he has already been mentioned several times, and in previous trailers they've shown him. So we're going to see him in his pre-form before his full form that we're familiar with at the end or at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Rings, where we see him battling all the different tribes and stuff like that for the rings, and he gets his hand cut off and the rings are destroyed. and we're going to be seeing kind of the evolution of how he went from this feeble, kind of like secondhand man to becoming this big baddie that we are familiar with in the Lord of the Rings films. So we're going to see him in a form before he actually is fully Sauron.
Yes, that's true. This is going to be now. I believe Sauron's a man, isn't he? Didn't he start off as a man?
Yes.
Yes. That's what I thought. Now, at that point, we basically, I believe, we're probably going to get more action to an episode 4. We're going to get more conflict. We're going to get more orcs. I'm thinking, and basically, I guess what else I would ask you would just be essentially, in terms of, the, I guess, series so far, going through episode 3, how do you feel this will go? What do you think about the flow? In terms of how the story's being fleshed out, what we're getting from episode to episode. In terms of how they're connecting and whatnot and everything. Now we know we got a big jump. We got Numenor, into this, the episode and everything. Episode 3. I mean, what's your take on sort of, I guess, not necessarily I don't want you to, give me a number or rate it, but I mean, just in general, how well they've done as far as, Amazon has as far as, you're making the series work from episode to episode and whatnot. I think it's been pretty good.
It has its ups and it has its downs in each episode so far. We definitely had a very strong first episode. The second episode kind of dipped a little bit, had a little bit too much story. And then this third episode picked a little back up. Not fully, but it picked it up a little bit more from that second episode, but still gave us a lot of exposition. So, I mean, I feel that, they're doing a good job with it, but it definitely has its ups and downs, most definitely in each episode so far.
Yes, I would agree with you 100%. I think that I mean I think it's been pretty solid. I think that it's been interesting seeing the different races being shown, whatnot, everything. The different hobbits as you mentioned earlier. From that perspective, I guess I personally feel like I'm hoping that maybe episode 4 we're actually going to get the stranger, some of the identity of his of some kind and whatnot, everything. You'd think. Now, you believe he's a wizard. If I remember correctly, right? You believe that he's a wizard. From what I guess the first film, Lord of the Rings.
Yes, yeah. I definitely think he is some sort of wizard. Yes.
Okay, yeah, the one that talks to animals and whatnot, and and all that stuff. So, I apologize, folks. So at that point, Cyber, well, and I just want to put out there, folks. As far as the story does go, I think it's cool that they basically they to some extent have flushed out all the races throughout the episodes. We have not, of course, seen, I don't even know, I'm not even sure if Sauron has an army at this point. As they mentioned, I guess probably but several years back to them, the ship, there have been, essentially, sightings or whatever, whatnot, to where, I apologize. No, as far as the, what I was going to say basically about the episodes 1 through 3, is that I feel like there's definitely been ups and downs, but as far as I'm concerned right now, I'm enjoying the characters. I'm liking the actors and actresses that are playing them. And if anything, I think it's nice that they decided to make that change, this episode. They introduced a lot of characters. We got Isildur. We got Elrond. For that point, I want to believe that essentially, this is not going to be the same kind of conflict that we saw in the Lord of the Rings films, is what I'm getting. At least it's not going to flush out to that level in season 1, I don't believe.
Most definitely. No,
Yeah,
most definitely. No, it's not going to be 100% as good as the films, because it is on a smaller scale of how they're doing it, plus also being separated in so many different parts. It's not going to be the same thing where they're able to draw out, make it more condensed either. Because as you can see, because it's being drawn out in 10 episodes,
yes,
it's a lot of more drawn out. So we're gonna get a lot more in-depth information into it. So yeah, it's definitely not gonna be the level of the films, but from what I've seen so far, it's up there. It's up there with the films.
sure. And now, um, you tell me. You probably would be able to answer this better than I could. Um, Overall, when these series are shot differently than movies are to some degree, right? I mean, there are kind of almost stark differences in terms of how you shoot. I would think, right? Like a series versus like a film, or is it basically the same thing? It just depends on the scale of what you're recording overall. And like is it basically the same thing? I mean, you're talking about the quality, I guess, being similar to Lord of the Rings. I definitely would say that the visuals and the CGI is definitely at a different level than the Lord of the Rings films. Like you mentioned earlier, Numenor looks great. Of course, that's gotten better. Now you mentioned earlier about liking the dynamic of there being something different. There being different aspects of this that actually isn't lock in step with the films, and I agree with you 100%. I think that's great. I do. And I guess probably, if anything, would you agree with me that maybe instead of I'm sure at some point across the span of the series, we're probably going to get big battles to some extent, but would it make sense, I guess, almost that, and we already know, they said right in the beginning, the Orcs are sort of like spread across Middle Earth. They're not centralized. Like they're not one big pack. So do you think it's possible maybe that, we could end up having more of a situation where, we have more like espionage and more like I guess maybe character driven episode as we go all the way through to episode 10, as opposed to kind of the epic battle scenes that we know from the films. I want to believe that if anything, that would lend towards there being some kind of potential situation where we get into the dynamic of like the men, whatever men are like with Sauron and whatnot and everything, right? Would it make sense to you possibly that maybe with Halbrand, he they already said essentially that I believe it was his father had some type of relationship or connection with Morgoth. Now at that point, I want to believe that and feel like he's going to end up being a part. I want to believe of some kind of situation where we're end up seeing maybe like a split or something like that, where you know what I mean, like essentially there's going to be men that are going to follow Sauron and the Dark Lord and whatnot and everything, right? We know Halbrand, I want to believe, is not with them. Now, would it make sense to you? You think maybe that we could end up seeing essentially almost like some almost inner drama, where we've got sort of I guess almost basically wind fighting in between the races, where you've got sides of them, the side with the light and some side with the dark, almost to some extent. Do you at that point, I guess, I'm not able really to grasp essentially because they haven't really fleshed it out. What what we gotten out of gaining with working with Sauron and the Dark Lord and whatnot, what you get out of it or achieve out of it and whatnot. They really haven't fleshed out what the ideology, I guess, is necessarily of Sauron. At this point anyway, or Morgoth, right, to some extent. Other than the fact that they want to control, I guess, all of Middle Earth, or dominate it or take it over or whatever. Do you think that, if anything, we could actually see possibly more like almost like I guess one is more character development across the span of the series, as opposed to the big battle stuff, the epic stuff. We could have a lot more almost episodes like this one where we get we got a lot of character development. There's dialogue. There's a tree, we're crossing, the map. Do you like that contrast? The fact that instead of having, a huge war, we're almost kind of getting like basically more of a, still interesting, but more, I guess, story driven, not as action driven angle of the series. Do you appreciate that?
No.
No.
I like action. I like that's what entertains me.
Oh, me too. Well, question. Well, I mean, hey, of course, I don't want to say when it comes to Lord of the Rings films, there were aspects of the films that were great that were not battles. There were, but at the same time, though, of course, the highlights almost are those battles. They are. And at that point, so basically at that point, then, do you think that it could be a detriment to the series anyway? That they're going in that direction where things are more like almost character driven, and we're having more of a instead of like epic battles and like armies going against each other and whatnot, we're sort of learning about the different races and whatnot and everything and understanding them. At that point, do you feel like that could be a detriment possibly to the series towards the end? Possibly it's going to get flat, maybe, or.
Well, honestly, I mean, it's a twofold thing. There are going to be those that are going to love it, and there's those that are going to hate it. And with any show, no matter what the show is, there's always going to be those that are going to find certain things detrimental. So less action, people are going to be up in arms over. A lot of story-driven, a lot of people are going to love it. So I feel that it's a yes or no situation here because there are going to be people that think it is, and then there's people that aren't going to think it is. So overall, I think that in general, I shouldn't, but in another general sense, it could be at the same time. So it's a 50-50 split there between it could be, it couldn't be detrimental to the show. And I know for some people, it's going to be, I've had a few people tell me like, oh, I'm trying to watch this show, but I'm not seeing enough of this or that and this. And I find it boring. So I can see that story driven can cause that. And with more action, I think that's probably why maybe the movies themselves are a little more well received, is because of all those action sequences and not so much story. So I think this is kind of, Amazon's way of like getting all that information in that they wanted to in the films without, compromising those films. So I think this is kind of that show that's going to give us all that stuff that a lot of people weren't looking for.
I think the cast also. I think the actors. I think the actors and actresses in Lord of the Rings films were of a different level, to some extent. Maybe what I'm saying. Some of them, to some extent, than what we're getting out of the series so far. But which I guess would make sense, though, right? I mean, that's kind of how things usually work. This is TV, even if streaming is TV. Now. I guess, basically, I guess my last question basically would be essentially, as far as, going into, maybe looking back again across the span of the first episodes, do you feel like, Galadriel is sort of, is the focus? I mean, to some extent, like, is she the driving force to some degree of the series? Is that what we've gotten? I mean, because they've added more characters. We've got there's more characters now from episode 1 across to 3. We've gone to different locations, everything and whatnot. At that point, do you feel like she's still kind of carrying things from episode to episode? Did you feel like in episode 3 she definitely was? She wasn't in episode 3 as much as like the other episodes. I didn't think, but I did notice that. No, go ahead.
She definitely wasn't in this episode as much as she had been in the past 2. But I definitely think and feel Galadriel is the main focus of this series. She is like the number one character. She's the one that the whole series is going to run by and on throughout the whole. We're going to have the offshoots of other characters showing them and stuff like that. But I think she definitely is the main focus, and I feel like by the end of this series, she will be at that point where we are at to the point where she is at pretty much the spot we found her in the Lord of the Rings films. So I feel that she definitely is the main focus of the series. And they even mentioned it when they were talking about when this was coming out, that they said that this is really a base series on that character, and we're telling her story. So I have a feeling that even though we're going to see all these other characters, the main focus is definitely going to be Galadriel throughout the whole entire series.
Yes, I would agree. And I don't know if this is actually official or anything like that, whatnot. But every time I want to call her Lady Galadriel. Does that make sense? I guess. Did she have a title of any kind besides Galadriel in the at that point in Lord of the Rings films? Did she actually have any? She wasn't the queen or like that, was she?
No.
No, that's right.
She was just Lady Galadriel. Yeah.
Lady Galadriel. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Galadriel. Yeah.
Yes, and I would agree with you 100%. I think that was a good decision on their part. To go in that direction. And I like the actress so far. I think she's been really good. Of course, I guess maybe to kind of close things out. Now, I don't want to get too far ahead because episode 4 essentially is already out. I believe it is. Now, basically, without getting in, too in detail. Cyber, we haven't watched it yet. Basically for you, I guess, what would your expectations be for episode 4 in terms of kind of maybe the direction we might go in, as far as we already know possibly we got Sauron, we're gonna maybe get more orcs, see more of like the dark forces or whatever and whatnot. I want to feel like there's going to be more conflict in episode 4. I do. I want to feel like there's going to be more action. I believe that. You tell me. What would you like to see in episode 4? What are you actually expecting in episode 4?
I honestly don't have any expectations for episode 4. I do know that we're going to be continuing the story that we left off on in this episode. Yes. So we'll be seeing more of that. But it would be nice to see some more connections to the original films in this episode. I know it's only the 4th episode. It's almost halfway through the series this season. And I definitely think that there is a lot more to be told in this next episode. I have a feeling probably because it's the 4th episode, we're probably going to get some more action, most definitely. And kind of to ramp up everyone to want to keep watching and stuff like that. So I feel there definitely will be some battle sequences in this one. This last one, we had a lot of battle sequences. We had that great orc sequence, with the elves then fighting all those orcs in that, basically that pit where they're being put, being kept by the orcs. So, we had that great sequence, which was really fantastically done. And that one elf that managed to survive, I think, was a real badass and really fun. So I think that we'll be seeing more of that type of action definitely in this next episode. But I don't have high expectations for it. I don't really have any expectations for it. I'm just looking forward to seeing what it's about and seeing how it, pushes forward in this awesome story.
Yeah, and you know what? I guess my take basically would just be, I guess, probably I would agree with you 100%. I think that basically what we saw towards the end of episode 3, where we did see now the elves were slaves on that construction camp, wherever the hell it was and whatnot, which I thought was interesting. Actually, seeing elves as slaves, I found interesting. We hadn't seen slaves at that point. We have, and I wasn't even aware the elves ever were slaves. I didn't even know that, to be honest with you. I had no idea. But I feel like I have a feeling that, what we ended up seeing in terms of the conflict with the orcs and the elves and whatnot and everything, at the end of the episode, going to end up kind of extending to some degree in episode 4 in some way. And basically, like I said, I think, Cyber, you pretty much, said it, the way you did. It is the mid-season point almost. So at that point, you would kind of expect that there would be some fireworks. what would be your, I guess, your rating probably, for this one on the 1 to 10 scale?
I would give it a solid 7. I would give it a 7.
Okay. I think that's pretty fair. I think I probably would agree with you. I think I probably would go with a 7. Yeah, 7, 7.5. I feel like, again, I felt like they were very similar. The episode, at the end of the episode for me, I wasn't any more excited or any more unhappy or anything whatnot that I was in episode 2. And I feel like overall, there's really not there's no massive like growth going on. Like we're not seeing like any like big change or like anything epic going on from episode, anything building really that I'm noticing to some degree. Would you agree with me on that? There's not really like a sense of a almost like the pace of it is almost basically kind of similar to some extent. There isn't a lot of up and down, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I'll tell you what, Cyber. Basically, at that point, unless you have any final thoughts that you'd like to drop on episode 3 before we do any plugs, do you have any final thoughts? Is there anything maybe that I didn't mention in the series, in the episode and whatnot that you noticed or whatever, maybe that was a highlight for you, or like that you feel like might you want to flush out or anything like that and whatnot?
All I have to say is that overall, I thought it was a decent episode, and that I feel you covered it pretty well. There was, I think, a great point. I think that I don't feel we really talked about was when Galadriel found that marker for Sauron in Numenor or in Numenor. Numenor. And I think that was a really cool little point that if you ever notice in majority of these films, they're always finding some sort of clue somewhere. No matter what adventure you're on, there's always some clue you come across. And I think this is a perfect example of something that Tolkien always made sure to put into his books when he wrote them, is he always liked to put these like clues that people found. And that was kind of like his, he liked to put that type of stuff in there to make it seem like a mystery, like a treasure hunt almost. And I think that was cool that they had that part in this film to kind of commemorate that and to give us a kind of a fun story to follow there, and showing that Galadriel is still very much in tune with wanting to find Sauron and destroy him, for destroying her family. So I think that was a cool little point. And overall, I thought, like I said, I thought they just did a really decent job with this, gave us some decent action, and overall, I thought the episode was pretty decent.
Yes, I'm glad that you mentioned that. The whole we did see the sign of Sauron, and essentially, basically, as far as that goes, I agree with you 100%. I like that angle. And in terms of, I guess, if anything, the fact that there were going to be high expectations for the series, no matter what. There's no way around it. So you're going to have people unhappy no matter what, like you said. There's going to be people that are going to like it, they're not going to like it. I mean, which is normal. That's natural. And I mean, honestly, if anything, I feel like maybe the expectations were a little too high. To tell you the truth. Again, like when we talked about, these aren't movies. It's a TV series on the streaming service. And it's going to be different. It was going to be different. It's not the same story. But I'm enjoying it so far. I am. I have a good feeling. I do, to be honest with you. I have a feeling that I actually do believe episode 4 will actually be interesting. I do. I'm expecting some reveals. I think we're going to see some new stuff that's going to be really impactful. I think they're going to flush some things out that we've been wondering about, like the Stranger, for instance. I think we're going to probably end up, learning more about probably episode 4. He's sort of a mystery, at this point still. He spoke, You know, he did finally. And basically at that point, I personally don't really have any plugs myself besides just plugging MCU'S Bleeding Edge and just mentioning that we do have, I believe, She-Hulk. I want to say episode. What is it? Was it 5 or 6 on Friday?
6.
6. We have episode 6. Yep, at 9:35 p.m. Eastern. We got She-Hulk episode 6. You know, we're winding down She-Hulk. And essentially, if I remember correctly, I believe She-Hulk is actually the last Disney Plus series before we then get the specials.
Correct.
Yep. So now it's gonna be interesting at that point. You know, so I haven't really planned that out yet. You know, that gives us an opportunity to do some different stuff. I'm looking forward to it. To be completely honest with you, this is gonna be interesting. When I realized that the show was gonna end and we were gonna have anything else after that, I love the Disney Plus series. I do. But I think that if anything, it's going to give me and Cyber a chance to kind of maybe go in a different direction with some of the Marvel stuff, possibly. Maybe do some more comic book stuff. You know, try to really get comic book related a little bit more. You know, and try to essentially maybe do some preview stuff. You know, with Phase 5, with Phase 6. You know, down the road that maybe we haven't done so much of so far. And at that point, I feel like basically, hey folks. It's the last Disney Plus series. So, you better make sure you watch our review on Friday night, 9:35 p.m. Eastern. Of course, I want to shout out, again, as always, Facebook. We do, very well on there. We don't get to see our views on there. But thank you, everybody on Facebook. We appreciate you. Rumble. I'm noticing our numbers going up on there. So thanks, everybody, people on Rumble, for catching us and whatnot and everything. Twitter Live. That's what I'm always confused. I still see the name Periscope on there sometimes on Twitter. So I thought Periscope was done, but I still see it up there. But I believe it's Twitter Live. Besides that, thank you everybody on YouTube. And please, everybody, if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed this review, please subscribe. Cyber, I'd like to hit 3,000 subs. We would really enjoy that. We'd like to hit 10,000 actually, but gotta hit 3 first. So at that point, we appreciate it if you subscribe. And hey, you know what? Look, don't be afraid to point out anything if you want to that we're missing maybe in this. If there's something that I didn't mention or whatever that's important in the lore or something or whatever that maybe you know more about this than I do. Hey, you know what? Look, I'm not an expert. I'm not this. I'm not gonna lie. So we're it's wide open. If you want to point something out, go ahead. Let us know. We appreciate it. And beyond that, all I can really say just is we're very thankful and appreciative to everybody that supports us. Supports us at the Bleeding Edge. And also, on Sunday, we're going to be doing, now we haven't set a time yet, but we're going to be doing, I believe, episode 5 of House of the Dragon. And it's going great. The series is great. It is. I think it's getting better and better. You tell me, Cyber, did you enjoy episode 4?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Episode 3 was interesting, wasn't it? The way that they had that whole dichotomy with Ares, where he had like that breakdown and everything, and everything and whatnot, and you almost saw him kind of like really show his inner self.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I really did. I thought it was very impactful.
Very impactful.
Yeah, it's very well done. It's a good series. It is. And we're going to enjoy the reviews. And hopefully we'll be able to get Cyber on this Sunday for this one. I'm hoping. But basically, Cyber, at that point, sir, if you'd like to plug your content. And I want to shout out Rizzle. I actually made some content on Rizzle. Cyber and I are on Rizzle. This is where we met. I was on Rizzle the other day. I do call and still consider it my home platform. I do. So I'll shout out Rizzle for once. That Cyber and I are on Rizzle. And if you know what Rizzle is, it's a TikTok style type, platform that's based off like 1-minute video content. And essentially, it's not a bad little app. It's not. I like it. It's not a bad little app. And again, this is where Cyber and I met. Now, I've never met one person ever that's ever heard of it. So I'm really hoping one day, at some point soon, I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to say, "Do you know what Rizzle is?" And they're actually like, "Oh yeah, I know all about Rizzle." Unfortunately, it's not happened yet. Now, Cyber, Besides the we got into earlier, in terms of the polling, what do you got going on with your content?
So, as I always say here on the MCU's Bleeding Edge, if you enjoy either me on the panel or me as a moderator on here, definitely check out my solo content under Cyberneticshark. As I can see my little thing here, Cyberneticshark. And yeah, definitely check that out on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Rumble, Instagram, everywhere you can think of. BitChute even. I just started recently putting stuff up on BitChute, so definitely check out there too.
Hey,
and so yeah, I mean, I have a new 1001 Movies to See Before Die review coming up on Friday. It'll be there 3 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube, so definitely check that out. It's a classic from 1923, a silent film, so definitely, if you're interested in the 1000 Movies to See Before Die, definitely check that out. But yeah, so yeah, check out my stuff if you like this stuff. I have James Bond reviews, as you can see there, as you can see up the top there. My most recent is, of course, Orphan First Kill just came out. I have some more shark reviews coming out, but I'll be focusing a lot again on my 1001 Movies to See Before Die reviews. I did that really quite regular on a basis for a while, and then I kind of died out and got into other things. But I'll be putting out newer reviews of newer films coming out too and stuff like that. Just got to work on that. And also, I've been really working on my shorts. If you love TikTok or you like Rizzle or if you like shorts, the 1 minute long videos, definitely check out my shorts. I've been killing at those, been throwing those up several a day. So definitely check those out. If you like what you see on there, definitely hit that subscribe button. And yeah, I appreciate everyone that has recently subscribed too. I mean, I'm almost at 400 now, so I'm starting to bump up there. So thank you all.
Most definitely. And you know what? I just want to shout out and say just that I give hats off to Cyber, because I don't know how I'd be able to pull off a 1 minute movie review. I do not know how I'd be able to make that fit or work personally. I don't, me myself, being so damn long winded. I don't know how I make that work, but hats off to you, Cyber. Now I will say personally, I've watched Cyber so much. I watched the House of the Dragon trailer review that you did and whatnot. I like that. I didn't watch Prey. I was going to look at it, but I didn't watch it yet, so I didn't want to spoil it. You know what I mean? So I didn't get into it, but I'm gonna watch it soon. And I just want to shout out everybody out there and whatnot, and let everybody know that I believe Cyberneticshark and I are past our 1.5 year mark with the MCU's Bleeding Edge. At it or right past it at that point. And I think it's just a good thing to point out there and whatnot, that we've existed that long. At that point, again, thank you to all our subscribers. We really appreciate you. Thank you to everybody on all the different platforms that supports us and whatnot and everything. We're gonna have some great shows coming up. I think that probably, if anything, on our next review for episode 4 next Wednesday, you will have Cyber. He'll be moderating. We'll probably have 2 guests on that one. We'll probably have a 4-man show. I think that we'll probably end up having June back, I really enjoy. And potentially maybe Andrew from Geek News Now Network might pop on. He's hard to get sometimes, so I don't know. Sometimes I don't know really till the last minute if he's on or not. But we're going to show up at some point. He's been very, very invisible. So at some point he's going to pop up. But basically, folks, at the end of the day, all of you who end up checking this out in the 9 live version, where we get most of our views overall, thank you very much. We appreciate you. And besides that, folks, this is the end of our review of episode 3. Episode 3 is pretty good. The series is pretty solid so far. Don't agree with all the haters, to be honest with you. I understand some of the negative critiques, but some people are really smashing it and everything. I'm not really on the same page with them, at least so far. But either way, thank you very much. For Cyberneticshark and I, and the MCU's Bleeding Edge, we'll see you on the next one.